quite a good selection of electric art tonight. We're going to start with Simon Fenoulhet, who is a visual artist. I think you're based in Cardiff.
I am.
Yes. And Simon is going to tell us about his work with electric lights. Do you want the light off or?
Yeah, we have the light off. Okay, I'm going to talk really about just one project called Curtain, a project I made a couple of years ago now. But it was quite an interesting journey from small beginnings. Just by way of introduction, I'm an artist, I make installation work, and a long time ago, about 1996, I started working with light. So this is my studio. My studio is a dark space. That may kind of be obvious if you're working with light, but it does mean that if I can get the space really, really dark, I can then observe quite subtle effects with small amounts of light. So sometimes I come out of there and I have no idea what sort of day it is because I haven't seen any daylight. And this is the first piece I ever made with light. I'd been collecting small blow-moulded plastic objects just out of curiosity and collecting them over a long period of time. And then one day I put a small electric light inside. And they're not LEDs, they're tiny, they're what model makers use. They're called grain of wheat light bulbs, they're miniature light bulbs, really beautiful things. And so I made an installation with that. And that was the start of a whole body of work that was about changing the nature of what are essentially very ordinary objects by the use of light. And then I discovered this material called electroluminescent wire. I think I'd seen it on a website, and over the years I've experimented with lots of different light sources, conventional light bulbs, LEDs, lasers. But this is a really curious material because it glows when you pass a current through it. But unlike LEDs, it doesn't have a really long lifespan. So it eventually loses its kind of luminance. But I was interested in using it in some way, and this is in my studio. I've put a ring of electroluminescent wire around a piece of board, and then I'm walking around in a circle while the camera shutters open. So I was experimenting with it, and it's one of the things that I think characterises the way I use my studio space, is that it's an experimental space. It's a space where there's physical activity playing with materials, so that I get to understand what the properties of different things are simply by handling them. So I'm kind of thinking as I'm thinking with my hands, if you like. And I did lots of these things. I built profiles, and I made all these kind of light forms over a period of time, with the camera shutter open, and it records the passage of the light. And I thought, I don't really think this is going anywhere. I wasn't really sure that they were works, if you know what I mean. I wasn't really wanting to make them into finished things. And then one day in the studio, I suspended a piece of electroluminescent wire from the ceiling, and in the way that you do, I had a packet of drinking straws in the studio. I can't really remember why, but I collect all sorts of things and keep them around just in case sort of serendipity happens in that way. And I threaded the wire with the drinking straws, and was really excited about the way that it glowed. So that afternoon I immediately then thought about using a lot of this material, threading a whole series of these strands with these coloured drinking straws. And I envisaged a kind of like a curtain, if you like. The idea of a curtain came at that moment, of something that was suspended. But I didn't, because they were about £5 each, these strands of electroluminescent wire, and I thought, oh, well, I've got to take it beyond that, but I haven't really got £250 in my back pocket to buy, 50 of them or whatever. So I threaded them on thin nylon and backlit them, which was surprisingly effective actually, just with a focused projector beam. So that's just then backlit. To experiment with ways of playing with the colour relationships, if you like. So that helped me resolve a few things about the work. But at the same time I thought, well, it's okay having it as a static thing, but wouldn't it be interesting if I could control the light level in each individual strand? Oh, that was me trying to imagine it as a kind of, it's my crude photoshopping, which I thought I'd share with you. It didn't end up quite that long, but it did end up pretty long. At this stage, I went to talk to some friends of mine at Stage Lighting Services in Cardiff, and I'd worked with them before. They do a lot of electronics for theatre and performance. And I said, hey, how would you go about controlling hundreds of different light sources if you had to? And they said, oh, well, that's not a problem. You can use DMX, lighting control, which is what they use in theatres. It's short for digital multiplex. And I was introduced to the baffling world of theatre lighting and lighting desks, where one DMX universe is 512 things that you can control. You've got 512 control points. So I quite like that idea. I've jumped on a bit. So they said, yeah, you can use DMX to control hundreds of different things. So I then had to kind of fix the scale of this thing. So this was quite useful to try and sort of visualise it. I then planned it to be a 2-metre drop. Okay, so the curtain's 2 metres high, but I wanted it to be somewhere between 8 to 10 metres, something of that order. And when I worked out the spacing, I had to keep it under 512 if I was going to control it with a lighting desk. There's a big gap that I won't bore you with the details, but basically I worked out how much it was going to cost to do this, and it was thousands and thousands of pounds. And so I applied for money for a show I had coming up at Newport Museum, and they put some match funding in, and between us we raised the money to buy all the materials, because I think it was about £5,000 worth of electroluminescent wire in the end, which I had made up in China where they manufacture it. And then there were other components which I'll tell you about in a minute. So it started to grow into a really kind of a big project at that point. So this is part of the construction. It's put together in sections. There are 7 panels, and there's 64 wires hanging off each of these panels. So that's the first time we actually controlled it from a lighting desk, and we got them to all light up. The little boxes step up the voltage, so it's very low current, but in order to get the wire to glow, it needs quite a high voltage, so there's little inverters. And then in order to get the information to each bit of wire, you need a DMX controller, and each one of these little control boards, there's 7 of these, one on each of these 62 wire sections. and each one has a binary address, so that your DMX controller can send up to 512 varying messages, and this distributes them to the right place at the right time and provides the power as well. And you can buy these things commercially, but they're really, really expensive. But I started, like you do, I started researching on the internet, and I found a fantastic guy who I've never met in Walnut Creek, California, called Jesse Lackey, and he makes a lot of hardware for lighting and sound installations. And he built me these circuit boards, and they were about £200 each. So that was a real find, because his specification, which is meant to control banks of LEDs, and it was just the right specification to control electroluminescent wire. There's plenty of power in there to control the lights. So we've got the delivery mechanism, and we've got all the wires. But I'm really unhappy with this idea of having to control through a lighting desk, because you're then having to do it in a series of steps, and it's not at all kind of intuitive. So I was introduced to this software called Catalyst. That's just a screen grab. Because when I talked to the guys at Stage Lighting about wanting a more intuitive way of working, I said, well, how would it be if I could somehow transfer some live light values, if I had a kind of a video camera or something like that, and get this curtain of light to respond to what it's seeing? And they said, oh, I don't know whether you can do that live, but they said, we have got pixel mapping software. And the thing is, you'll have seen it in action, because if you ever go to a big gig where you see those huge screens, they're made up of colour change LEDs. And so pixel mapping software takes a piece of video, and it has an XY location for each pixel, and it's watching or recording that light value, and it can relay it to something much bigger, which is an LED. And I thought, well, I could use that by taking a line of, in the end it was 448 pixels, notional pixels, if you like, and then using the light values of whatever light is relayed over those sensors, if you like, in the software, to use video. So I could trigger the electroluminescent wire by having each one of those strands respond to 1 pixel of light. So then I started the search for video that I could use with the Catalyst software, so that I could kind of read off it. That was really interesting, because I started out thinking about the kind of movement of light I wanted across this thing, and it, I wanted something that was sourced from nature. I was filming clouds moving across the sky, and I was filming reflections in water and all sorts of different things. But because often the thing that you see, that you're projecting something onto as an effect that you want to achieve, when you try and do that, through this convoluted means, it often didn't kind of turn out like I wanted it to. So that was a long and quite difficult learning process to understand how contrasty the video needed to be, or how quickly it needed to move in order to make an effect. For those of you who are interested in this kind of thing, this version of the software can control 2 DMX universes. So basically you'll control, these are the parameters that control each video clip, so you can set it to loop, or you can set to play different clips. This is a library of different test clips which you can load up to the software. So physically I'm putting this thing together, and at the same time I'm working out how I'm actually going to control it. So it's sort of, it's a bit mad in a way, because it's, you know, I prefer to have it sewn up in advance, but it didn't quite work like that. The other thing about this is that when you're, this was for a show at Newport Museum and Art Gallery, when you're putting work on exhibition, you can't assume that the people getting it going in the morning have got kind of similar technical knowledge to you. So you can program it. So you set a queue list, and you tell it what you want it to do. So I could get it to wake up, switch on, and play a sequence, and then go to sleep at night, and then do the same thing the next day. And it can even do different things on different days. So it's got, you know, you can cue the whole thing to run completely automatically. And once I cracked that, I thought, that's it, I'm sorted now. And we built a little cupboard, and a Mac Mini sat in this cupboard, just working away without any hitches, really, for about 8 weeks, I think. It took a long time to solder all the connections. I'm just proving that I actually did something physical here. That's my concentrating phase. But the guys at Stage Lighting let me work in there. I was there for weeks, putting this all together. And then I teach part-time at the University of Wales Newport, and I thought it would be a valuable educational experience for the students. Because I thought, I bought, I don't know, 8,000 drinking straws ready, and I had them all in boxes. And then I worked out, I did a few, and I thought, do you know, it's going to take me about 2 months of doing nothing but threading these things. So I was going to test it in college anyway, so I got the students involved.
Cheap labour.
Free labour, yeah. They were very good. And there was only one, two rules really about, because I wanted this distribution of colour to be even, but I didn't want to set up a pattern, if you understand the difference. And the easiest way to do that is to have very simple rules. So the simple rules for putting it together were different colours vertically and no more than 2 colours the same adjacent. That's it. So, and that ensures that you get this kind of fairly even spread. Then we switched it on. And it was very exciting actually, switching it on, because it's 9 meters long, so it's a big thing. It's quite sort of immersive. You can stand in front of it and lose yourself in it. The more you adjust to the light, you do become aware of all the little flashing lights and other stuff. Now, the light levels it produces are fairly low. It's not a really bright thing. This is by way of an apology for the quality of video that you're about to see, because I really struggled to film it in low light, but I have got some clips of it coming up soon.
So are you playing the sky or something else?
Actually, one of my favourite clips that I discovered was it was a film of sunlight playing on the surface of the water, but it was filmed from underwater. So you got this really interesting kind of movement of light as the beams would kind of disperse. So if you can imagine each one of those strands as electroluminescent strands refers to a horizontal band of pixels mapped onto this piece of video, so it's reacting to the video. I did discover you can get it to work in real time as well. And I did some workshops with some young people, and they were able to shoot their own footage, and then we transferred it onto this. So they were kind of running around the place, and then the light and dark patterns would run around as well. So that was quite interesting. So I thought this, you know, I was really interested in this very subtle wafting of light that kind of travels backwards and forwards. But I also tried something that was a little bit more out of time. For those of you who might be interested in how I did it, the next bit, I thought, well, I want this kind of three-dimensional effect of things moving at different speeds. So I did a little backlit screen and painted some sticks black, and then I've got a slippy piece of plastic here, and that's my little camera there, and then over here I've got a bobbin which I can wind like that. So that stays still, but the camera moves. So if you can imagine, because it's in three dimensions, it's like walking past trees in a wood. You see them moving here. And that's what it looked like when it was translated onto the surface. What was interesting about this was that, unlike the other piece, these areas are really very dark. And because in a gallery you get people on both sides of this object, it meant that when it's lit, you see the curtain, but as soon as you get this area of darkness, you can see straight through it as it's hardly there, which was something I hadn't anticipated.
And you'd have the silhouettes of the people standing around.
Yeah, well, there's enough light to kind of illuminate them from the rest of it, but the darkness, that's a funny thing about, eyes are very good at, you know, it's that kind of, you read the brightest thing and then your eye compensates. But if you're looking through something dark, you can read something quite, you know, without very much light beyond it. I mean, that's pretty much the end of the presentation. So if people have got things they want to ask, or if I missed out some key bit of technical explanation, I'll try and answer it. Yeah.
Were you tempted to Diction's to also cut off the thicker bit of the straw, so that you didn't have the grey lines?
Well, no, because I suppose I've worked a lot with you know, found objects and you know, ready-mades, and I quite like that kind of knuckle thing. It was part of the found. I did toy with the idea of randomising that, which way up they went, but because I thought of it a little bit like fabric, I quite like that as if it was part of the
Like stitching on.
Yeah, like the weave or something. Yeah.
You're right, without it, it wouldn't be a straw anymore. It would just, and people would assume that you bought these things, but they can see it's hand assembled. It's from a mass-produced object.
It is interesting that, you know, I told you it was a straw very early on. You know, there were straws, and I've still got a lifetime supply. It came with black ones, and because I didn't use the black ones, so I've got all the black ones. But they. Because when you see it for the first time in a gallery, you're not aware that it's straws, and so it takes a while. You're looking at this illuminated object, and it's a big thing, you know. And it takes a while. It's not until you get quite close to it that you think, yeah. So I quite like that double take. You know.
You mentioned a few times that we were doing this and we were doing that, and we were working on it. So who else was involved?
My friend that stage lighting.
Okay.
Yeah. No, because if I'm honest, I struggled with understanding the way the DMX technology and the software worked, and so and also actually working out how that circuitry was going to work. So technical guy Steve Tutor of Stage Lighting worked with me on it, You know, I mean, he's a friend, but I paid him, you know, out of the money. You know. So it was a kosher relationship. But yeah, so I don't claim to be able to understand all of it. But then I think I quite like that relationship, that working with people with technical knowledge that enable me to do things that otherwise I just wouldn't be able to do.
So now you've got this system like it could be used for lots of different things.
It could actually, yeah.
Are you planning to use it for something else?
Not yet.
Okay.
No.
So I think the live dimension will also be quite an interesting
Yes.
thing to, depending where you place it and who sort of output you connect.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've had various ideas about using that to trigger lights in a more directly interactive way. But yeah, the right opportunity hasn't come up yet. I mean, it couldn't be a permanent installation, but it could be something that was in a gallery for sure.
Yeah.
Does it have to be linear across a wall, or could you maybe have a block form and walk through it past them?
Yeah. I mean, there were other things in this show. There was a piece on the floor, there was a piece on the wall, and there was this suspended piece.
Yeah.
So it followed a kind of family of objects. But I have since thought about a kind of three-dimensional matrix of freestanding things that could be lit.
So a bit like that torus shape you showed us earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe recreate that in this 3D matrix. Is that
Possible.
Yeah. It's all possible, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, at the back.
So I was just thinking, a lot of your ideas seems to be about, well, it started with this idea of the straws and then the technology, and then the pursuit was often to do with the technology and the funding and all those sorts of things. What is the notion? What do you hope that people experience?
Right. Yeah. No, I hide the computer and the technology in a cupboard because I want people to see drinking straws that are doing this extraordinary thing. And that's what the work is about. And that's why I showed you those little tiny plastic toys and things lit up, because that was the first thing I made. And I suppose that's what the work is about. It's about transforming things that they got another kind of aesthetic life that they were never expecting to have. I'm talking about them like they're real, I don't like a lot.
Yeah.
No, you know what I mean? It's like there's
It's
this.
quite interesting because as it started to rain and they were showing the video, I suddenly thought that was part of the video because and then this idea of the forest and it's sort of in a way it's that combination of experiences, and until you know they're drinking straws and from a distance very much they look like lines from pencil drawing actually. Like many pencil and something of like a David Hockney kind of colour.
Yeah, it could be animation.
And I think as Peter said, there's many more things that you could do with it, and this idea of things participating inside the straws as well, so shadows and you've got the trees, but maybe, it's because I'm an illustrator actually, I'm looking for a narrative I think. I just...
Oh, it's an internal narrative of mine about working with...
But I like this idea of the straws as actual objects and people and things, and they've got a life of their own, and they're kind of bobbing about, dancing away for you. And then,
I mean, having to raise money is incredibly dull, and this was a very expensive piece to make, and I've gone back to making things that I can control all the different aspects of at the moment, so they're much more static and much more obviously about, a simple light effect and a specific material. But yeah, I want, now I've got this setup, the software's expensive, it's kind of, it's waiting really in reserve for the right opportunity.
have you shown it elsewhere since Newport?
Yeah, it went up to Oriel Davis in Utah, but nowhere else. It's a shame really, from my point of view.
Did you say the wire stuff only lasts so long?
It's like 3,000 hours.
It's about the same time as your average video projector though.
Yeah, inverter and a battery box, and it'll run up a PP9.
You can knit yourself a jumper.
Yeah, could. Maybe you should. Yeah.
I guess afterwards, when they got done, perhaps you could project light onto them and then have them straws like that way.
Oh well, it's quite opaque. Yeah. You probably have to read. I probably have to get more students to.
Feeling way.
Yeah.
Can you
Are they safe to interact with? Can you go through them, say, or is it a static?
You can. You saw how curly they were in one of those early photos. Well, it was really difficult to straighten them, you know. And then, yeah, I had to put little lead weights on the bottom. And then people did enjoy kind of. So I then ran a piece of washing line to tie it all together at the bottom. But that's led me on to another project, so I'm now making a piece that uses washing line. One of those happy things after I bought the washing line. Put the washing line on the light box. That's nice.
So why did you have the straws in the studio in the first place?
I don't know, it was like, you know, I can't remember.
No, it's like, so I think like the washing line came here because of the straws.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
straws
no, I
came
can't
from
remember.
a former project. So,
I was probably stuffing LEDs in them and holding them up in the dark, you know.
Okay, well I think we're going to move that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.